I came back from a routine hardware store run. Nothing dramatic, just a couple bags of concrete mix rolling around in the back of my truck. And that's when I saw it. My driveway. The same gravel strip I'd been driving on for over a decade, completely sealed off by a brand new iron gate, keypad, the whole "you don't belong here" starter pack. And right there hanging like a bad joke was a polished wooden sign that read Silverwood Ridge Estate. Private events only. Now I actually laughed at first, like, out loud, because private was a bold word to use when you're standing on land that isn't yours. But then I pulled closer and realized this wasn't some temporary setup. This was permanent, fresh asphalt, landscape lighting, ornamental trees like they were prepping for magazine shoots. My dirt driveway had been turned into some luxury wedding runway overnight. I got out of the truck, walked up to the gate, punched a random code just to see. Nothing, obviously, and before I could even process what I was looking at, this woman in a navy blazer, clipboard, earpiece, whole corporate NPC vibe, comes striding over like she owns oxygen itself. She goes, "Sir, this is a restricted access road now. Do you have a vendor code?" And I just stared at her for a second, because I genuinely thought she was joking. I said, "Yeah, I've got a code. It's called I Live Here." She didn't laugh, not even a courtesy smile, just flips her clipboard around and starts explaining, in that rehearsed tone, like she's said this speech 50 times already, that the adjacent property had been redeveloped into a premium wedding destination. And this road, my road, was now the official entrance for guests. Then she hands me paperwork, through the bars of the gate like I'm visiting someone in prison. "Easement transfer agreement," she says. And I'm reading this thing, trying to make sense of it. And apparently 6 months ago, the previous owner next door, Mrs. Lou, sweet old lady, baked cookies every winter, sold her land to this development company, and somehow, magically, also transferred usage rights to my driveway. My driveway, which, according to this document, I now had limited access privileges to weekdays only, between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. No weekends, no evenings, no exceptions. I actually had to reread that part because I thought I was misunderstanding it. But no, they were dead serious. They had effectively turned my own property into a shared access lane that I needed permission to use. I asked her straight up, "So how exactly do I get home tonight?" And she just gestures vaguely toward the trees like, "You can walk around the perimeter until your access code is approved." Walk. Around. My own land. That's when it stopped being funny. I looked past the gate and noticed something else. There was a full-on attendant booth set up where my turnoff used to be, valet signage, cones, staff uniforms. They had built an entire system to manage traffic, on top of land they didn't even question. And the kicker? I asked how much these weddings cost, just casually. She goes, "Packages start at $35,000. $35,000 per event, using my driveway as their grand entrance." And suddenly everything clicked. This wasn't a mistake. This was intentional. Someone somewhere had decided that my quiet little access road was more valuable as a luxury funnel for rich people's wedding photos than as, the only way I get into my house. I went back to my truck, just sat there for a minute, engine off, thinking, because there are moments in life where you realize you're either about to let something slide or you're about to make it a problem. And I'm not gonna lie, I considered just backing out, calling a lawyer, doing it the normal way. But something about the way she said restricted access, like I was the inconvenience, that stuck with me. So instead, I grabbed my backpack, cut through the woods behind the property, because I had to literally sneak onto my own land like some trespasser, and made it back to my house that way. Took me about 20 minutes. Every step of that walk, I could see the lights they'd installed, hear crews setting up, laughter, music testing, like they were celebrating already. Didn't even know what was coming. Because what Silverwood Ridge didn't understand yet, what they hadn't bothered to check, was the difference between using land and owning it. And that difference was about to cost them everything. Now let me pause right there for a second, because this is where most people get tripped up, and honestly, it's exactly what Silverwood was counting on: confusion, intimidation, and people just assuming the paperwork must be right. According to standard procedure, when you're dealing with shared access roads, what usually exists is something called an easement. And that sounds fancy, but really it just means someone has permission to use a piece of land they don't actually own. Key word there, permission, not ownership. From a legal perspective, that distinction is everything, because the person who owns the land, the underlying land, still controls what that land can and cannot be used for, especially when the terms are clearly defined. And here's where it gets interesting. Most residential easements, like the one Mrs. Liu had, are specifically limited to residential access, meaning you can drive to your house, bring groceries, have guests over, normal life stuff. But the second you flip that into commercial use, valet parking, event traffic, paid guests, you're stepping way outside the boundaries, and in a lot of cases, that voids the agreement entirely. This is a psychological trap developers lean on all the time. They move fast, build big, and act confident, because confidence makes people hesitate. It makes you second-guess your own rights, like, well, they seem official, so maybe I'm wrong. But the truth is speed doesn't equal legality, and confidence doesn't equal ownership. And the lesson here is, if someone suddenly tells you that your access, your land, or your rights have changed overnight, don't panic. Don't comply immediately. You slow it down, you check the paperwork, and you figure out exactly who owns what. Because in situations like this, that one detail is the difference between being pushed out and holding all the leverage. So that night, after hiking through my own woods like I was breaking into my own life, I sat down at my kitchen table, pulled out the original closing documents from when I bought the place back in 2009. Yeah, I keep everything labeled, dated, boring as hell until moments like this, and I found it buried in the legal description. One line that changed everything. I owned the road. Not shared, not partially, not conditionally. I owned the physical land underneath that entire stretch of pavement they just poured their money into. Mrs. Liu, nice as she was, had only ever had an easement, a right to use it, and even that came with restrictions. Residential access only, clear as day. So yeah, at that point, I didn't feel confused anymore. I felt something way better, calm, the kind of calm you get when you realize the other side has no idea how bad they messed up. Next morning, I called a property attorney, local, sharp, the kind of person who doesn't waste words. I emailed everything over, deed, maps, the little prison bar paperwork they handed me. And about 20 minutes later, she calls me back, and the first thing she does is laugh. Not polite laughter, not professional, full-on, you've got to be kidding me laughter. She goes, they paved your land, installed infrastructure, and are running commercial operations on a residential easement? Yep. Another pause. Then she says, all right, this is going to be fun. Now when a lawyer says something's fun, what they mean is someone's about to pay. By noon, she had drafted a formal notice. Clean, aggressive, no fluff. Basically stating that the easement was immediately terminated due to unauthorized commercial use, which, again, they should have known. And if they didn't, that's even worse. They had 72 hours. 72. To remove the gate, the booth, the lighting, the whole Pinterest wedding fantasy they built on top of my land. And here's where timing gets real interesting. Because their grand opening wedding wasn't months away. It was Saturday night. 200 guests, high-profile couple, local media coverage. The whole thing was already being hyped online like it was the event of the season. So yeah, the clock wasn't just ticking, it was screaming. Friday morning, their lawyer calls, and I could hear it in his voice immediately. Casual, dismissive, like he thought this was just some rural guy trying to scare a development company. He actually chuckled, like, audibly, and said, we believe there's been a misunderstanding regarding shared access rights. My attorney didn't even let him finish. She faxed over the deed, the original easement terms, the termination notice, all stamped, highlighted, impossible to ignore. Silence. Then the tone changed completely. Now it's, well, we may need to review this further. Which is lawyer code for, oh, this is bad. They started throwing around words like litigation, dispute, trying to stretch things out by time. But here's the thing, they didn't have time. And they knew it. My attorney made it simple. Either negotiate immediately, or we file for an injunction. And if that happens, your entire event schedule collapses, not just one wedding, all of them. They stalled, didn't respond. And that told me everything I needed to know. They were gambling, hoping I wouldn't actually do anything, hoping I'd wait. I didn't wait. Saturday afternoon, about 4 hours before the ceremony, I drove my pickup right up to that gate. took a second to line it up just right, and parked it sideways across the entrance, completely blocking the road. No gaps, no wiggle room. Just a solid wall of not happening. Then I killed the engine and sat there. Didn't take long. First came the staff, confused, then annoyed, then panicked. One of them runs up, knocking on my window. "Sir, you can't park here. We have an event." I just pointed at the ground. "Yeah, I know this is my land." Cue the chaos. Catering trucks started backing up down the road. Florists trying to figure out where to unload thousands of dollars in arrangements. Guests calling, asking why GPS is telling them to turn into a dead end. And then, the wedding planner. You could spot her instantly. Headset, clipboard, pure stress radiating off her. She comes storming over, already yelling. "You are interfering with a contracted event. Do you understand the liability here?" I said, "Oh, I understand liability perfectly. That's why I'm sitting right here." She didn't like that answer. Nobody did. About 30 minutes in, someone calls the sheriff. He pulls up, steps out, takes a look at the situation. Calm guy. Experienced, the kind who's seen every version of neighbor disputes. I hand him my deed. He reads it, flips a page, nods slowly. Then he turns to the venue manager and says, he's within his rights. And just like that, their last bluff disappeared. Now it's not a misunderstanding anymore, not a gray area. It's real. They tried finding another access point. There wasn't one. 40 acres of perfectly curated event space, with zero legal entry. Time kept ticking. Guests started leaving, posting online. Confusion turning into embarrassment. I overheard someone say the bride was threatening to cancel, photographer already uploading behind-the-scenes disaster clips. And right around 6 p.m., 1 hour before the ceremony, my phone rings. My attorney answers on the other line, puts it on speaker. CEO of Silverwood. No attitude this time, no confidence, just urgency. "We're prepared to discuss terms." "Yeah, I bet you are." So I laid it out, simple, clear, non-negotiable. You remove every structure off my land within 7 days. You pay for damages, legal fees, everything. You get a formal easement, commercial this time, but it's not free. $5,000 a month, minimum term, prepaid. And most importantly, I retain the right to revoke it with 30 days notice if they ever try something like this again. Silence. You could practically hear him calculating the cost of cancellation, refunds, lawsuits, reputation damage. Then, agreed. Just like that. I moved the truck, slowly, no rush. Watched as the gates opened. Cars started pouring in, staff scrambling to recover what they could. The wedding went ahead, 90 minutes late. Not exactly the flawless luxury experience they advertised. But it happened. And the following week, right on schedule, the gate came down. The booth disappeared. And I got a check. A big one. Because in the end, they didn't steal my driveway. They just forgot to check who it belonged to. So yeah, that's how a quiet little gravel driveway turned into a 6-figure lesson in property law and ego. And honestly, a little bit of patience. Because if I had reacted too early, if I'd just gone in yelling, making a scene without knowing the facts, I probably would have lost all my leverage before the game even started. And that's really the first takeaway here. The lesson here is, information beats emotion every single time. It's real tempting, especially when someone's clearly stepping over you, to respond immediately, to push back hard, loud, fast. But in situations like this, the person who understands the rules better, not the one who shouts louder, is the one who wins. From a legal perspective, what saved me wasn't luck. It was documentation, boring, tedious paperwork that most people shove in a drawer and forget about. Deeds, easements, property descriptions, that stuff feels useless until the exact moment it becomes everything. And here's something a lot of people don't realize, especially if you live in neighborhoods with shared access roads or HOA involvement. Ownership and usage are two completely different things, and mixing those up is how people get taken advantage of. Because organizations, developers, HOAs, even neighbors sometimes, they rely on a very specific assumption that you won't question them, that you'll see a sign, a gate, a uniform, and just go along with it. This is a psychological trap, authority without verification. You see structure, confidence, systems in place, and your brain goes, well, they must be allowed to do this. even when something feels off. And that hesitation, that's where they win. Now, I'm not saying every situation is some grand scheme. Sometimes it's just bad paperwork, miscommunication, or people cutting corners, but the effect is the same. If you don't check, if you don't ask, if you don't verify, you end up negotiating from a position of fear instead of fact. And let's talk about the other side for a second, because there's a lesson there too. What Silverwood did wasn't just legally sloppy, it was psychologically arrogant. They moved fast, invested heavily, created a sense of permanence, because there's this belief in business that if you build something big enough, confidently enough, people won't challenge it. And honestly, a lot of the time, that works. But when it doesn't, it fails hard. Because now you're not just dealing with a disagreement, you're dealing with liability, public embarrassment, financial pressure, all hitting at once. And that's exactly what happened here. They didn't lose because I blocked the road. They lost because they built their entire operation on an assumption instead of verification. And here's the part one think matters most. I didn't win because I was smarter or tougher. I won because I slowed down, asked the right questions, and waited until the moment where my position was undeniable. Timing, that was everything. If I had blocked that road on day one, they might have had time to reroute, negotiate, drag things out. But 4 hours before a high-profile event, that's not a legal problem anymore. That's a business emergency. And emergencies force decisions. So if you take anything from this story, it's this. The lesson here is know what you actually own, understand what others are allowed to do, and never assume that confidence equals authority. Because sometimes the person telling you this is how it is just hoping you don't realize it isn't. And now I'm curious, what would you have done in that situation? Would you have handled it quietly through lawyers? Or would you have pulled the same move, blocked the entrance, and let the pressure do the talking? Drop your take in the comments, because I guarantee you, there's more than one way this could have played out. And yeah, if you made it this far, you already know the drill. Like, subscribe, and stick around. Because stories like this, they happen more often than people think.